Hello again and welcome to CBA's weekly blog. I'm Patrick Hurd, Principal Consultant at Community Business Australia. And again, I'm joined by Luke Mountford, Partner at Hopwood Gannon. Hello, Luke.
G'day, Patrick.
And we're continuing our series of chats, Luke, in regards to this consolidation that we're seeing in the not-for-profit space. We've talked about the importance of being strategic and thinking early about if this is an option for your organisation. And then we're starting to work through the process of what's important to do, particularly in that sort of due diligence period. And I really like last week we were talking about, getting that preparation done, that pre-due diligence phase done. And that's where we get to today's conversation around getting our house in order, I think you said. So what's the tips for getting your house in order if you're looking at this process?
Well, I think it's not just relevant to a transaction or a merger type of scenario, Patrick. It really is, just an extension of ensuring that you're operating your organisation in the best possible way. And quite often we find that, if we're acting in a significant contractual dispute for a client, or there's some kind of regulatory compliance issue that has become an issue with a regulator that we're helping a client with, when we dig deeper to find the underlying root cause of that issue, we often find that it's some kind of failure of the organisation's underlying governance or their risk management or regulatory management system. So I agree with you. It's very relevant in the context of a potential M&A transaction, but it's also the type of thing that if it goes unaddressed, these types of things, if they go unaddressed, they can lead to other problems in the organisation, even if you're not looking at any kind of merger. So this can be something as fundamental as making sure that your organisation is operating through an optimal structure, that your constituent documents are up to order, or up to date rather, or that you've got things like procurement policies and employment policies that are in place to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position where, in terms of regulatory compliance and other compliance, that the people who are working with you and for you are going to be the types of people who are going to be able to help you achieve the relevant standards that you need to achieve.
One of the areas that I see coming up regularly is even simple, well, you'd think simple things around the Constitution not really being kept up to date in terms of, is this something we can actually do? So I often say to clients when we do a strategy process, we bring the Constitution out and make sure that it's aligned up. So is that sort of what you're suggesting as well?
Absolutely. We had a really unfortunate scenario recently where a registered charity, had a client that was a registered charity with the ACNC, and they went and acquired an asset, and they assumed because they were registered as a charity that they'd be exempt from paying stamp duty on that acquisition. And when we went though and had a look at the Constitution, and they didn't check this beforehand, this wasn't something that they actively went and made sure they ticked the boxes. They just assumed because they were a charity that they'd be all right. But when we actually went back to the Constitution, the document they had didn't contain the things that it needed to contain in order to tick the boxes that our Revenue Office here in Queensland required to be ticked in order for that exemption to be available. So because all of this happened after the event, they had to pay stamp duty on the acquisition. So that's a really good example of something where if there'd been a more proactive approach taken, let's check the Constitution before we do this acquisition, we could have changed it. It would have been easy enough to change. We then would have ticked the boxes and we wouldn't have paid stamp duty that we didn't need to pay. So a great example of how something as simple as that can create a really bad outcome just by not keeping a Constitution up to date.
Right, a painful example, though, isn't it, in terms of the outcome? And you're right. So we always recommend get those matters updated regularly, like you. All right. So, other examples in terms of how we get our house in order?
Look, I think another good one is structure. We still see a lot of clients operating through structures that are really designed for years gone past. Your incorporated association type of structure, even organisations that have letters patent. There are much more modern, better regulated, more appropriate structures for not-for-profit organisations to run through. And it's one of those things where you sort of don't have to do it so you don't do it. But I do really encourage clients to think about that, because again, it comes back to this fundamental principle: is your house in order? Are you operating through a structure that is appropriate for the organisation that you're running? And if you're not, that's a base indicator of the fact that we're really not keeping our house in order. So even considering something as simple as your structure is a great example of that illustrates this concept.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We work a lot with not only the small to medium not-for-profits, but a lot of the church and charitable spaces, as you guys do as well. And that can be quite an impediment to the growth of your business, the expansion, the various funding mechanisms that you're engaged with in terms of government. So yeah, very important component to consider, and also to get the more contemporary structures that really suit that particular need. Couldn't agree more. So Luke, thank you very much for this series of conversations. I'm sure we'll have lots more to talk about in the future as well, and look forward to working with you and your colleagues at Hopwood Gunn in the future, in 2023 and beyond. So thanks again for your time. If you'd like to know more, of course, contact us at CBA, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Patrick.